I never thought my life would turn into something out of a Nicholas Sparks novel, but here we are. My name's Emily Carter. I'm 32, and for the past decade, my life has been comfortably predictable. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, picture-perfect townhouses, cobblestone streets, and enough southern charm to make tourists swoon. I work as a freelance graphic designer, which gives me enough flexibility to spend lazy mornings sipping coffee on my balcony. It's a good life, but it's safe. Too safe. I guess that's why the letter hit me so hard. It arrived on a Monday morning, tucked in with the usual stack of bills and junk mail. The envelope was thick, expensive, and addressed in a bold, looping handwriting that I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to toss it in the trash. I mean, who writes letters anymore? But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was the same, elegant, old-fashioned. Dear Emily, it began. You don't know me, but I know you. I've watched from a distance for years, and though it's a coward's way, I couldn't leave this world without telling you the truth. I loved you once, deeply, completely, and I believe you loved me too. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, but I've left behind something I think you deserve to find. Go to the place where we shared our first kiss. No name. No signature. Just that cryptic message. At first, I laughed. It had to be some kind of prank. I mean, watched from a distance? It sounded like the setup to a bad Hallmark movie. But then I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something real about it, something personal. The problem was, I had no idea who it could be. I hadn't exactly left a trail of broken hearts behind me. My dating history was embarrassingly sparse, and none of my exes seemed the type to pen a posthumous love letter. Still, the letter stuck with me. By Wednesday, I was obsessively replaying every romantic moment of my life, trying to match the words to a face. Then it hit me, Josh Winters. Josh was my college boyfriend. He was funny, sweet, and a little rough around the edges. We dated for 2 years, and I thought he might be the one, but life had other plans. He got offered a job in California, and I wasn't willing to leave Charleston. The breakup was amicable, or so I thought. I remembered the first time he kissed me, right under the big oak tree in Marion Square. It was after a picnic, and I had powdered sugar from a beignet on my lips. He teased me about it, then leaned in. It was the kind of kiss that makes your heart stutter, the kind you don't forget. So, Thursday afternoon, I found myself standing under that same oak tree, feeling like a fool. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, maybe a second letter? A box with some dramatic reveal? What I didn't expect was a man. He was tall, with messy dark hair and a crooked smile that made my stomach flip. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. You got the letter, he said, his voice warm and low. My mouth went dry. Who are you? Ethan. He hesitated, searching my face. Ethan Brooks. We met, years ago. I stared at him, trying to connect the name to a memory. Then it hit me. Ethan was Josh's best friend. We'd only met a handful of times, usually in passing. I remembered him as quiet and serious, the opposite of Josh's easy charm. Why did you send the letter? I asked, crossing my arms. His expression softened. It wasn't from me. It was from Josh. My breath caught. Josh? Ethan nodded. He passed away 3 months ago. Cancer. It was fast, he didn't tell anyone until it was too late. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. Why would he? My voice trailed off, unable to finish the question. Ethan pulled a small box from his coat pocket and held it out to me. He wanted you to have this. Inside was a locket. I opened it with trembling fingers. One side held a picture of Josh and me from college, laughing at some forgotten joke. The other side was engraved, "Always yours." Tears blurred my vision. I don't understand. Ethan's voice was gentle. He never stopped loving you, Emily. He asked me to give this to you, to make sure you knew. I didn't know what to say. The weight of the locket in my hand felt like an anchor, pulling me back to a version of myself I hadn't thought about in years. Ethan hesitated, then added, "There's more. He told me to take care of you. That was his last request." I looked up sharply, searching his face for some hint of insincerity, but there was none. Just quiet determination. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a constant presence in my life. At first, I thought it was just obligation, fulfilling a promise to a dying friend. But as we spent more time together, something shifted. Ethan wasn't just Josh's shadow. He was kind, patient, and funny in a way that caught me off guard. One night, as we walked along the waterfront, he stopped suddenly. "I know this isn't what you expected." "It's not what I expected either. But I think Josh knew what he was doing. Maybe this was his way of giving us both a second chance." I didn't answer right away. My heart was a tangled mess of grief, guilt, and something new, something terrifyingly hopeful. Finally, I met his gaze. Maybe he did. That was 6 months ago. Ethan and I are still figuring things out, but for the first time in years, my life feels unpredictable in the best way. And sometimes, when I look at the locket, I like to think Josh is watching over us, smiling that crooked smile, knowing he got the ending just right. The thing about love, or life, really, is that it doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care if your heart is still tender from old wounds or if you're second-guessing every decision. It just moves forward, like the tide, pulling you along whether you want to go or not. Ethan and I were learning that the hard way. We took things slow at first. He'd come over for dinner, and we'd sit on my balcony, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his job as a wildlife photographer, a career that had him constantly on the move but gave him a deep appreciation for the fleeting beauty of life. I shared stories about my clients, mostly small businesses in Charleston, and how I'd always dreamed of designing something bigger, like a book cover or a museum exhibit. Every moment with him felt easy, natural. But there was always a shadow between us, Josh. One night, Ethan asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you think you would have gotten back together with him? If he'd come back?" We were sitting on the dock behind his house, the water reflecting the moonlight in rippling patterns. The air smelled like salt and marsh grass, and the weight of his question made my chest ache. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks we would have found our way back to each other. But another part wonders if we were better as a memory. We were different people back then, and life has a way of changing you." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "He used to talk about you all the time, you know. Even after you broke up. He'd say you were the one person who ever really understood him." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wish I'd known. Maybe I could have reached out. "Maybe," Ethan said softly. "But I think he wanted you to be happy, even if it wasn't with him." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle lapping of the water. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. Things weren't always easy after that. People in a small town notice when you start spending time with someone new, especially someone who's connected to your past. There were whispers, side glances, and even the occasional outright comment. One afternoon, as I was leaving the coffee shop, I ran into Grace Miller, one of Josh's old classmates. She looked me up and down with a smirk that made my stomach churn. "Emily," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I heard you and Ethan have been spending time together. Isn't that a little soon?" I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see me flinch. "Josh wanted us to be happy. I think he'd understand." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Well, I guess everyone grieves differently. Take care, hun." I walked away before I said something I'd regret, but her words stayed with me. Was I betraying Josh by moving on? By finding comfort in Ethan? That night, I told Ethan what had happened, half expecting him to tell me we should take a step back. Instead, he surprised me. "People are always going to talk," he said. "They don't understand what we've been through. But this, what we have, it's real, Emily. And I'm not going to let their opinions ruin that." His confidence was like a bomb, easing the doubts I hadn't even realized I was carrying. As the months passed, our relationship deepened. Ethan showed me parts of myself I'd forgotten, my adventurous side, the part of me that used to dream big and take risks. He dragged me out of my comfort zone, convincing me to go paddleboarding, take a road trip to Asheville, and even submit my work to a national design contest. "I'm not going to win," I protested one night as I hit submit on my application. "You don't know that," he said, grinning. "But even if you don't, at least you tried. That's more than most people can say." I leaned over and kissed him, grateful for his unwavering belief in me. But just when it felt like everything was falling into place, life threw another curveball. It was a Thursday morning when I got the email. A woman named Rachel Turner had found my contact information on my website and wanted to meet. She said it was about Josh. My hands shook as I read and reread her message. Who was she? An ex-girlfriend? A family member? And why did she want to talk to me now, months after his death? Ethan was out of town on a photo assignment, so I went to the meeting alone. Rachel chose a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, and when I walked in, she was already seated at a corner table. She was around my age, with dark hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail and a guarded expression that made me immediately wary. "Emily," she asked as I approached. I nodded, and she gestured for me to sit. "I'm sorry to spring this on you," she began, her voice clipped but not unkind. "I've been debating whether to reach out for weeks." "What is this about?" I asked, my heart pounding. Rachel hesitated, then pulled a small photo from her purse and slid it across the table. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old, with bright blue eyes and a mischievous smile. He looked so much like Josh that it felt like a punch to the gut. "This is Charlie," she said quietly. "Josh's son." The room seemed to spin. "Josh had a son?" Rachel nodded. "He didn't know. I found out I was pregnant after we broke up, and I didn't tell him. It wasn't until he got sick that I thought about reaching out, but by then, it was too late." I stared at the photo, my mind racing. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want Charlie to grow up without knowing the people who loved his father," Rachel said. "And because I think Josh would have wanted you to be part of his life." I didn't know what to say. The idea of stepping into Josh's past in such a tangible way felt overwhelming. But as I looked at the photo of Charlie, something inside me softened. He was a part of Josh, a piece of him that still existed in the world. And maybe, just maybe, he was another chance to honor the love we'd shared. When I told Ethan about Charlie, he didn't hesitate. "You should meet him," he said simply. "If it feels right, we'll figure it out together." And so, I did. Meeting Charlie was like meeting a younger version of Josh, and over time, we found a rhythm. Rachel and I weren't exactly friends, but we worked together to make sure Charlie felt surrounded by love. As for Ethan and me, we're still navigating the twists and turns of this unexpected journey. But every step of the way, I'm reminded of something Josh once told me: love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's messy and hard. And so we show up, for each other, for Charlie, and for the love that connects us all. Life has a way of weaving unexpected threads into a story, creating connections and closures you never saw coming. For me, it felt like my world had come full circle, but in a way that wasn't just about endings, it was about new beginnings too. Over the next year, Charlie became a central part of my life. Rachel, for all her initial guardedness, slowly let her walls down. We didn't become best friends, but we found a shared purpose in giving Charlie the kind of family Josh would have wanted for him. Ethan, ever patient and steady, became a natural part of that dynamic. It was strange how seamlessly he stepped into the role of a father figure, not replacing Josh, but building something new alongside his memory. One day, Charlie and I were sitting on the porch swing at Rachel's house, watching the sun set over the marsh. He had Josh's blue eyes, the same spark of curiosity that had drawn me to him all those years ago. "Aunt Emily?" he asked, his little voice curious. "Yes, sweetie? Did my daddy love you?" The question caught me off guard, but I nodded. "He did. Very much." Charlie tilted his head, considering this. "Do you love Uncle Ethan?" I smiled, brushing a curl of hair off his forehead. "I do. Very much. Daddy would like that," he said with the kind of innocent certainty only a child could have. "He'd want you to be happy." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "I think you're right." Ethan and I moved in together a few months later. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment, no teary-eyed proposals or sweeping declarations of love. It just felt right, like the next step in a journey we were already walking together. Our life wasn't perfect, there were awkward dinners with Rachel, moments of doubt when grief resurfaced, and the occasional sting of small-town gossip. But every challenge brought us closer, grounding us in the kind of love that isn't flashy or fleeting, but solid and enduring. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching a summer storm roll in, Ethan took my hand. "I have something for you," he said, his voice soft. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant and understated. It wasn't the kind of ring that screamed proposal, it was the kind that whispered forever. "This isn't about rushing or proving anything to anyone," Ethan said. "This is about us. About building a life together, no matter what that looks like." I looked at him, my heart full. "Yes," I said. 1,000 times, yes. The years that followed were a blur of growth, love, and healing. I won that national design contest Ethan had pushed me to enter, which led to more opportunities than I could have dreamed of. Ethan's photography took him all over the world, but he always made it back in time for the moments that mattered: Charlie's birthday parties, quiet dinners on the porch, and lazy Sunday mornings that felt like magic. Rachel eventually remarried, to a kind man who adored Charlie as if he were his own. We built a strange, beautiful extended family, bound not by blood but by love, loss, and the shared commitment to creating something meaningful out of the pieces Josh had left behind. One day, years later, I found myself standing under the oak tree in Marion Square again. Charlie was with me, now a teenager with Josh's mischievous grin and Ethan's quiet confidence. We'd come to the park for a picnic, and as we packed up to leave, he lingered under the tree. "This is where Daddy kissed you, right?" he asked, his voice deeper than I was used to. I nodded, smiling. "It is." He looked thoughtful for a moment, then grinned. "Good spot." As he jogged off to join Ethan by the fountain, I stood there for a moment, the breeze rustling the leaves above me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the sting of grief, only gratitude. Josh had been my first great love, the one who taught me how to open my heart. But Ethan was the one who taught me how to keep it open, how to build a life that could hold both the sorrow of the past and the joy of the present. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And as I watched my family, messy, complicated, and beautiful, I knew I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because sometimes, the best love stories aren't the ones that go as planned. They're the ones that find a way to keep going, even when the ending feels like it's already been written.